America's development into an industrial nation did not fully occur until 1815, but it began as early as 1790. The movement from agriculture to factories is evident during the 19th century, with the census of 1800 reporting that three-fourths of American males worked in agriculture to two-thirds of the workforce working in factory-related jobs in the 1900s. Like in Britain, Americans also moved to urban cities to support the growing industries. America was also very quick to adopt the new machines and methods from Britain because of the Patent Act of 1790, allowed Americans to patent foreign inventions as their own. British inventions like the steam engine also influenced the invention of things like Robert Fulton's steamboat. With the influence of the British industry on the global economy, America quickly caught up to their level of development. This led to an American primacy in industry during the 19th and 20th centuries, which is known as the Second Industrial Revolution.
Hey guys, it's Erica, and welcome to this segment of our program called Turn Up's Top 10. Today we will be talking about the 10 effects of the Industrial Revolution on cities. The Industrial Revolution was a period of major developments, from the positive innovation of the use of technology to the negative impact on human living standards. So, with that said, let's get started. Effect number 1. The cities became overcrowded due to the rise in population. The incoming flow of people was due to the enforcement of the enclosure movement. The enclosure movement took previously common land used by poor farmers and sectioned it off so only the rich landowners could use it to farm. This then forced unemployed farmers to be in desperate need for jobs, which could only be found in cities. The overcrowded urban areas also caused unhealthy environments that led to the formation of slums. The cities were filthy because of the small living spaces of one-room apartments and the lack of a sewage system. The slums were also filled with crime, prostitution, and disease in England. All of these factors proved to negatively affect the English society. Effect number 2. The environmental state of the cities was one that was difficult and unbearable to live in. This effect was highly noticeable, especially with the existence of air pollution. Air pollution was a result of the construction of factories that exposed fumes into the atmosphere. As you can see in the picture, the city was covered in darkness as the coal-burning factory chimneys expelled harmful smoke. Number 3. Staying with the topic of pollution, there was even more pollution on the city streets. The cities lacked a sewage system, which led to the contamination of water sources. Indoor plumbing did not exist, so the only option was to remove wastes by throwing it out the window onto the streets. People had to be careful where they stepped, and it was best to hold your nose while walking through the smelly streets. Effect number 4. Women were greatly affected by the Industrial Revolution because they began to have a new ideology that defied the cult of domesticity. This idea of domesticity stated that the ideal woman was to have the 4 cardinal virtues of piety, purity, submission, and domesticity. The primary role of a woman was to be a homemaker. Women during the industrial era, however, could not live up to these standards because of their jobs in factories. Women were mostly seen working in textile mills, and just like children, women suffered from the conditions within their jobs, such as the impacts of dangerous machines, including serious injuries and the exposure of harmful things, long hours with low wages, and the cruelty of factory owners. It was common for women to be sexually abused. Young women often had children with older men at the factories, so this broke their purity in the eyes of society. Also, women broke the value of submission because they had a feeling of independence. Females in urban areas did not feel completely controlled by males since they were working for themselves and they were not just doing household chores. These changes in England proved that the women in the working class had a different perspective of their self-value. Effect number 5. Children worked in factories in horrible working conditions. With the transition from the need for skilled workers to the use of unskilled workers, the use of children became popular. It was okay to now have unskilled workers because new inventions and machines came out of the Industrial Revolution that were able to complete the tasks in the factories. These machines, such as the spinning jenny and the water frame, were simple yet significant to textile factory production. Children were expected to perform the same tasks every day while even putting their own lives at risk. Some children were forced to climb into tight spaces where there was not a lot of oxygen available. To make the situation even worse, the kids were exposed to dangerous chemicals that could potentially be fatal. Even after children who could have been young as the age of 5 or 6 years old completed all their work after 12 to 14 hours with hardly any breaks, they were still only paid 1/10 of what men were paid. A good example of this was the textile mill owned by Richard Arkwright, the inventor of the water frame. Of his 1,150 workers there, 2/3 were children. Children also dealt with the pain of their abusive employers, who would beat them because they were considered powerless. Other jobs children could have done included working in mines, glassworks, and as chimney cleaners. It wasn't until the Factory Act of 1833 that the children began to see improvements in working conditions. Until then, children were expected to grow up fast and take on the responsibilities of a full-time worker. Effect number 6. The creation of public transportation. New forms of transportation included the expansion of railroads with the use of steam-powered locomotives and the building of roadways. These improvements to transportation got people to their destinations faster as well as could carry many people at a time. Effect number 7. There were many protests in the cities by workers who wanted more voting rights and reforms to be made so bread would become affordable. One example of these protests was the Peterloo Massacre, which took place in Manchester, England in 1819. 60,000 protesters gathered at St. Peter's Fields, where they were interrupted by soldiers that were sent in. It left 11 people dead and over 700 injured. The protesters were rioting for universal male suffrage and the repeal of the Corn Laws. By gaining universal male suffrage, there would no longer be only 2% of the population that were allowed to vote. Universal male suffrage would give all white males the right to vote. But African Americans and women still lacked this right. Some historians believe that this event led to the day when more people would have the right to vote. The Corn Laws were repealed in 1846, but before that, they caused grain prices to rise. This led to riots and protests such as this one. Effect number 8. The spread of disease due to the close contact between people, the lack of hygiene, and the lack of effective medicine. Diseases that were common included cholera, tuberculosis, typhoid, and the flu. Disease spread fast, therefore the life expectancy dropped. Many factory workers in cities also suffered from work accidents, causing deformations, severe injuries, and possibly death. Disease and accidents were both major factors in the high mortality rate. Effect number 9. The growth of a larger gap between the poor and rich. This gap was due to the lack of opportunity for low-class families who worked long hours yet were paid low wages. The poor remained poor, which was even more evident through their horrible living conditions. On the other hand, the middle class, who consisted of the factory owners, benefited from the Industrial Revolution. The middle class, or bourgeoisie, did not deal with physical labor and lived off of the productivity of the laborers.